Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. I hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. Today, we are talking about hidden foods and false marketing. So really diving into alternative names for inflammatory ingredients, how companies are trying to trick consumers, and how you can just overall simplify reading food labels. I feel like we've all made it so complicated to go grocery shopping, and honestly, most of it does not fall on us. The responsibility, unfortunately, is falling on the consumer, but the responsibility should really be on the manufacturer, the food processor that is making these foods for us to consume. I don't think there really should be any question as to why type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer are continuing to be on the rise, why obesity is now so prevalent, especially among 12-year-olds. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about how 12-year-olds were already going on Ozempic. And Ozempic or Mounjaro, those are two weight loss, weight management medications, but to be giving that to a child at 12 when they are proven to decrease bone density, decrease muscle mass, and these children at that age shouldn't be weight training or probably are not eating enough protein, raises a lot of concern. And those are things that I'm very, very passionate about, and I really hope you leave this episode feeling fired up and honestly a little pissed off about the food situation in the United States. This is not to, of course, scare you. That is the last thing I want to do with these podcast episodes. But the truth is you need to know your stuff, okay? If you do not know your stuff, you are going to continue to eat food that is quite literally poisoning your body, and that sounds extreme. I am not super extreme. I'm somebody who practices a lot of balance. I'm not somebody who takes my own food everywhere I go or refuses to eat out. That's not the instance, and that's why I'm not trying to, again, scare you into never eating out again, scare you into never eating processed food again. But if you don't know these things, nobody's going to teach you, and nobody's going to explain these things to you. And so that is why I thought today's episode was just so important, and you're going to continue to hear the passion in my voice because I cannot keep a chill when I talk about these things because they make me so riled up. And I really am somebody who makes a majority of my food from scratch. I would say 95% of our meal is typically made from scratch. The rare exception would be if I added like crackers on the side or did some chips on the side, or honestly, I can't think of anything else. Like, I truly try to use everything from scratch, mostly, or make everything from scratch, mostly just using ingredients. And that has taken me a lot of time to do. I was even watching Ballerina Farms' videos on Instagram the other day, and they're just so therapeutic to me, how she truly makes every single thing that she at least shares, right? I'm sure they consume things that are not made from scratch, but like even making her noodles from scratch, making her yogurt or Greek yogurt from scratch. And it really every time just inspires me and shows me where I could also improve, because I by no means am perfect in making things from scratch, but I sure do try. And I think that's just something I would, if this is something when you listen to today's episode and you're like, ooh, okay, this is raising a lot of concern. Maybe you already have a pre-existing health condition or a health concern. I would encourage you to think about what you eat all the time and how you can start making it from scratch. For me, and you've heard this before, but sourdough was truly the gateway drug into getting into making food from scratch. I would say my lifestyle, not that I ever tried to but that I tried to be exactly like somebody else. But when I was watching Ballerina Farms' videos, I was like, honestly, my life really does mimic a lot of this. We raise our own broilers, we butcher them, we have our own laying hens, we get farm fresh eggs every day, we feed them great food, and they are grazing all day long. I have a garden where a lot of my produce is coming from this summer, and a lot of the meals I'm making are with my garden produce. I've been canning I shouldn't say I have been canning. My grandma had helped me can some green beans, so I'm canning things. I'm making sourdough from scratch. I make any bread-like product is coming from scratch, because for me, I love bread, and I went through a phase of life where I was very, very low carb, meaning low starchy carb, bread-like carbs. You might know this by now, but I want to just reiterate this. I was terrified of eating bread. I wouldn't do noodles, wouldn't do rice. I was very much like, I'm going to consume vegetables, fruit, protein, and then I will really, really modify where I'm having a starchy carb. And really what healed that fear for me, which it took a lot of time, but was understanding the difference in quality of breads. And so for me, it was a no-brainer to first start buying sourdough bread from my friend Emily. Then when she moved away to Illinois, I had to basically learn how to make it on my own. And that was a challenge. It was super difficult for me at first. By no means was it perfect, but I got so excited every time I'd make a loaf of bread, and I still do. It still fills me with so much joy to, like, tomorrow morning. So I'm prepping a whole wheat loaf right now. Tomorrow morning, to be able to wake up and know that I can have farm fresh eggs, avocado, and all of that smothered on a warm piece of sourdough. Like, you guys, there's so many, like, there's not much else that makes me so excited when it comes to food than that. Like, that is the pinnacle. And that is where I really started making things from scratch. And then I just really got into it. And I know it takes time, and I know it takes a lot of effort. And I'm going to talk more about this when we look at reading food labels and finding, swaps for ingredients that aren't super great. But really, we have to, as a society, stop viewing mealtime as something that needs to be done as fast as possible. And if you're listening and you're like, but it does. Like, my schedule is so crazy. My kids are so busy. It does have to be super fast, quick, and easy. I would encourage you to really evaluate your schedule. And this is something that is a whole conversation on its own. But we have to get out of the rat race that we find ourselves in. And I know that there are going to be phases of your life where that is not possible. 100% understand that, right? But if you reflect back and you're like, for the last 4 years, I have been so chronically stressed, and I have busied myself for so long that I truly cannot sit and read a book. I can't sit in silence, or I can't even spend 20 minutes to prepare a meal because that feels like way too long. I think there's a lot of things you might need to reevaluate about your lifestyle and how you move forward. If you are, contemplating stress, or if you struggle with stress, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to the episode. I can't remember which one it was, but I talk about your body's stress response and how we can hang out in that resistance phase for so long until ultimately our body is exhausted. And that is when you find yourself doing really, really well. And then all of a sudden you're like, nothing has changed, but my body cannot do anything. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I'm so exhausted. I feel like I can't even get out of bed in the morning. That is your body telling you you were under stress for way too long. It could no longer hang out in that phase. And ultimately, now you have to face the consequence, which is exhaustion. Again, exhaustion isn't a bad thing. It's a way for your body to recover, to rebuild. But if you ignore that in the exhaustion phase, then you're finding yourself in that circle of stress, right? That cycle of stress. And so that was really a long-winded way of just saying we have to slow things down. Moving to our farm truly has forced me to slow things down. And I was actually talking to Lyndon, she's been on the podcast a couple times, about this. We were just talking about business things, and she was like, I truly feel like you're a completely different person than when I met you a year ago. And I genuinely could not have agreed more. I feel like if I was her and I would have met myself a year ago, I would have been like, get me away from that person because she's a ball of stress and she's making me even more anxious. It's truly how I would have felt about myself. But now, how I go about life, not saying I'm not stressed, not saying things don't stress me out, or work-related things don't stress me out, or people don't stress me out, but I feel like my approach to handling it is in a form of rest rather than in a form of continuing to do more and more until you get the desired result. Because I really don't feel like we have that much control in manipulating our lives, and that God truly is working so many things out. And now I'm going on a long tangent, I know, but again, kind of in alignment with thinking about this, I saw this quote recently, and it was like, if what you're wanting isn't happening, God is preparing something so much bigger for you. And if I would have heard that when I was in the depths of just like, I can't even fathom where my brain was at when kind of the first year I had gotten married. Getting married wasn't the issue, right? I loved the being married part, but the navigating life post-college part was something that was such a difficult thing for me. I had so many jobs I hated. I was doing so many things that I disliked. I didn't really feel like I had any purpose or any motivation. And I really didn't know what the next steps looked like for me. And I actually think about this every time I drive past the Lincoln Surgical Center, which is so random, but I interviewed there for a worksite wellness position. I had a referral. I felt really good about the conversation, and they never even called me back. And they were supposed to do like 2 more rounds of interviews, and then they would let us know. And I never heard back from them. And that felt like such a slap in the face in the moment, because they wanted somebody that was new to worksite wellness. What they were offering to pay people wasn't that fantastic, not enough that you could probably afford to get somebody who had years and years of experience. And I had all these new certifications in holistic health coaching and personal training, and I had gotten my bachelor's degree, and I thought, man, I really have a chance with this. Nothing. And then I think if I would have gotten that job, I probably would have felt like I was stuck in either Lincoln or Omaha and not able to move back to where I grew up, right? We wouldn't have gotten the house we got. I would have never started my own business and would have never been able to work with, by now it's over 100, well over 100 women in improving their health and decreasing inflammation. That would have never happened. There's so many avenues that my life has taken that would have never happened if that opportunity would have gone exactly like how I was trying to manipulate it to go. And really just a long-winded way of saying what is stressing you out doesn't need to. And I truly don't even know where I was going with that, but just thinking about the pace of your life. And if you feel like right now you're in a season of go, you have no opportunity to rest, I would encourage you then to think about what your escape plan is from that chronic stress, because you truly physically cannot hang out in that cycle for that long. And I know that was so far out from where I really started this conversation with talking about making food from scratch. We're going to talk more about that as I get further on in the episode, but I just really feel like those were things that were heavy on my heart today that I just needed to share with you. A little bit more of a catch up from the last week. We had a wedding in Omaha this weekend. It was awesome. It was a perfect wedding. Delicious food, great people there. Got to hang out with my family this weekend. We went to church in Omaha on Sunday, which is truly always a highlight. I just love the church that Nate and I had gone to when we lived in Omaha, and now we just don't get there very often. So that was so good. And then we got sushi, which I had been craving for 4 days before that. Nathan was like, I truly hope that this sushi is going to fulfill whatever craving it is you have, because we can't get sushi around us. The best sushi you can get around us is probably well over an hour away. We like Blue Sushi if you live in Nebraska. And my family actually went there, and most of them actually tried sushi for the first time and all really liked it. So it's a great place to go to if you've never had sushi and you want to try it. They have some of the best options, so many options. So that was just something I'd been looking forward to, honestly, all weekend. And I really think another piece of this too, that is not related to this weekend necessarily, but just as I get into August, creating content is something that I've actually been having a lot of fun with again. I really am just trying to be intentional with how I spend time on social media, the things that I post, and making recipe videos. It truly just fills a different part of my soul. And I made an avocado BLT pasta salad recipe, recently posted it over on Instagram. It was so delicious, and the sunlight was beautiful, and it's honestly been a pretty gloomy weekend into this week. And so just having like such a warm video to record and edit, it just fulfilled the piece of me that I really didn't think I cared much about. I thought I was kind of over creating content, any of that. But then I realized tapping into that and re-tapping into that, it truly had been fulfilling that creative side of me that I really haven't tapped into for the last month. I would say taking photos is kind of an outlet for me, but I really just didn't do a lot of that. So that's something that, again, I'm starting to enjoy more, and that is just a really good feeling. Getting into the segment today where I talk about how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit, because I truly believe that all three of these need to be in alignment to feel like you are living a truly nourished, well life. So how I'm nourishing my body is I actually started the program. It's a mindfulness program by Sammy Clark, which she has on her platform, Form. That is a mouthful. Form is the platform, Form. And I do have, actually, I'm an ambassador for them, which is not why I'm sharing this. Obviously, work out how you prefer to work out. But if you're interested in just looking more into that, I do have a code, which I could put in the description of today's episode. Just if you're interested in trying it, I think you get 7 days. Your first 7 days are free, and then over $20 off of your annual membership, which is only like $99 anyway. But that is something that I had kind of gotten away from. I know last week I talked about starting a new exercise program. This was probably about 2 months ago, and it was very strength focused. And although I like that, there is truly nothing that makes me feel stronger than doing Sammy Clark's workouts. Something about it, they're 30 minutes long, and in my previous brain, I would have been like, 30 minutes is not long enough. You need to be lifting for way longer than that, because that's just how I was kind of brought up and how we trained in high school and honestly junior high through high school. But the 30-minute workouts absolutely kick my butt, and it's truly no joke. So I did her full body workout in this program on Saturday morning, and then this morning I did her lower body workout, and it was so good. It's always like when you're on the brink of wanting to give up, but you know you can push through another 10 seconds, like that's how you feel the whole time. So you feel so accomplished after the workout because you're doing different moves. She keeps it so interesting. And again, I'm not trying to pitch this program to you. 100% do what you need to, but I truly am obsessed with it. And I could honestly talk about it all day long, which is weird because I always thought, I don't know why I took a lull from doing her workouts, but we're back and I'm so happy about it. She also in this program, so this is kind of moving into how I'm nourishing my mind. She has a gratitude or like more of a mindfulness piece of this. So she does some with somatic breathing or somatic movement. So like shaking your arms, shaking your legs, getting that energy out of your body. But then today I did her gratitude walk, which is also, like I mentioned, part of that program. And so it was like a 10-minute walk. So after my 30-minute strength workout, I went outside and did a 10-minute walk, listening to the kind of meditation, the gratitude meditation, and really just was the best way to start my day. Like I want to start my day like that every single day. And I'm really happy that she obviously gives us the tools to do it. And that whole platform is just truly incredible. So then how I'm nourishing my spirit, I really have to tie this back to church on Sunday. While we were doing communion and kind of reflecting, I was just praying that I could feel the energy and the excitement that I physically felt like just a different energy in church on this last Sunday. I don't even know how to explain it. Like when your body is just like tingling and you're just like so happy and excited, and it's truly like an indescribable feeling. But just pray that I could feel that throughout this week and until I could go back to that church again, just because I just felt so overjoyed. Like I honestly am almost brought to tears every time I go to those services. And again, like I can't explain it, but it's just something that is so special to me, and just prayed for that feeling and that closeness that I felt to God throughout the rest of the week. Okay, so let's move into the bulk of today's episode, talking about hidden foods and false marketing. I'm going to start out by talking about hidden foods. And again, Not to scare you. This doesn't mean you need to obsess over everything you're eating and critically look at food labels, but I think there are a lot of ingredients on foods that we just don't know what they are. We don't know what they mean. And kind of a rule of thumb that I tell all my clients is that if you cannot mentally picture what the ingredient is, you need to do more research on that product, right? So if you're looking, for example, I was actually shopping with a client and we were looking at Simple Mills products. Simple Mills is a great brand, but they use a cassava flour. So it said cassava root flour. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, gosh, I'm trying to picture what cassava root is. Like, obviously it's a root that they've ground into a powder, duh, but what is it? And so I actually, while I was with that client, we searched up like, what is cassava root? And we saw a picture of it and we're like, oh, okay, it comes obviously from the earth. It is a whole food. And so that then kind of confirmed like, okay, now I can picture what cassava root looks like. So when I buy Siete Foods tortillas, I know what cassava root is. And that's the flour they use in a lot of gluten-free products. But if you can't picture it, you need to do some research. And the first few times you go shopping, it might feel a little overwhelming because that is a completely different experience than if you just grab things because on the label they look healthy, right? If you're not looking at ingredients, which I was not one to look at ingredients until I really got into coaching and doing the work that I do, I always just cared about calories. That was all that mattered to me. Calories, if it's high in calories, it's going back on the shelf. Don't care what's in it, going back on the shelf. And so that is where we have to kind of know some of these ingredients and know the alternative words that they're using for some of these ingredients. So we're going to start out. There are a lot of them, so I'm going to try not to chit chat too much. And if you would like a full list of exactly what I'm talking about, go ahead and just message me on Instagram, Facebook, email, honestly, whatever way you want to message me. And I will send over this full list that I've typed out here because remembering all of these things is going to be a challenge. It's a challenge for me. I by no means have all these memorized. So having a list, kind of like a cheat sheet, is super helpful. All right. So we're going to start off with rapeseed oil. Rapeseed oil was previously the name of canola oil until it basically kind of like rebranded into canola oil. So if you look at a package and it says rapeseed oil, that is a different form of canola oil, but it's the exact same thing. Canola oil is made from a rapeseed. All right. Other inflammatory oils are going to be vegetable oil, soybean oil, and then a low quality sunflower oil. Just things to look for. Again, I'm not going to deep dive into all of those. If you have questions, that's where, maybe getting some help and going grocery shopping with me would be a good option, just so we can deep dive into these things. But I'm going to just do my best to kind of brush over them, tell you why they're not great for your health, and then we'll just keep it rolling. Okay. So the next one then is potassium bromate. So this is a human carcinogen. Gosh, it is a struggle to pronounce some of these things, but that is basically like a chemical that can cause cancer. And that is added to flour. And it's also used in highly processed and packaged baked goods. So looking at your breads, your tortillas, your bagels, your crackers, all the things. Little Debbie, check her out because there's going to be a lot of things in Little Debbie, anything that should raise kind of a red flag. Moving to propylparaben. This is used in pastries and again, some tortillas. This can cause reproductive harm because it's considered an endocrine disruptor, which endocrine disruptor, that basically means that it acts as a synthetic form of estrogen. And, females and males have estrogen, right, in our bodies. It's part of our hormones. But this ingredient can also alter the expression of your genes. So consuming foods that are not high in this compound are going to be important, especially during those developmental stages in a child's life. So when they're in the womb, when they're, all throughout childhood and into kind of prepubescent, post-puberty, that's really when it's crucial that you're not consuming foods or they're not consuming this compound. It can also impact the immune system negatively and harm your brain and reproductive organs of your children. So thinking about a child in the womb, Really important that this is not an ingredient found in most of your food, right? I talk about most because I know we cannot all be 100% perfect and we can't expect that of ourselves, but just having awareness in especially those different stages of your life or your child's life to make sure they're not consuming things that are harming their health later on. Next two are BHA and sodium nitrate. So BHA is butylated hydroxynisole. You guys, I'm going to butcher all of these. But it's used in cured meats like ham, sausage, bacon, and again, it's a potential human carcinogen, meaning, again, it can cause cancer. Another thing I'm going to say about me not pronouncing these things right, because you guys know I'm not the great at pronouncing things in the first place, but if you cannot pronounce something on a food label, that should also be raising a red flag. So like maybe I should have learned how to pronounce all of these things, but I hope it's proving a point that if you cannot pronounce it, it should not be in your food, right? Even I, which am not great again at pronouncing things, can pronounce most of the things on my food that I have in my house. Almost all of it, right? Those ingredients you should be able to pronounce. So if you can't, again, raise that red flag because that's not probably the best product then. Okay, moving to BHT, which is butylated hydroxylane, which is also then used in cereals, Pop-Tarts, some granola, again, can cause cancer. I'm going to say can, not will, because I don't want to make any claims or get, honestly, this episode flagged because these are things that people do not really want you to know. Companies do not want you to know. The food FDA probably doesn't want you to know either because they've not really done extensive research because honestly, I think they let a lot sweep under the rug, but that is a whole new conversation. We're not going to get into it, but know your stuff. This is why this episode's so important. So I'm going to say could, not that it will, because not everybody that consumes this is going to develop cancer, but it's possible and it's been shown in multiple research studies. Okay, soy is the next one. This can increase estrogen in the body, and I really do have actually a personal example of this. There is somebody that I know very well, and looking at their diet, they consume a lot of foods that are very high in soy and very high in whey. So 2 of their 3 meals in a day probably consist of some sort of protein bar. And these protein bars are not high quality. They're not super great. And although this is not a conversation I could have with that person, I'm going to have that conversation with you, is that if you are consuming foods that are super high in soy and whey, your body is not going to respond very well because whey in low quality granola bars is really, really crappy. It is a source of protein, yes, but not the best source of protein you can be consuming, right? It's not a whole food source of protein. Well, this person is also doing hormone replacement therapy, right? To decrease estrogen and increase testosterone. Okay, well, now that I'm able to reflect and just look at what this person is eating, again, it's not somebody I can really have this conversation with, but if I was to look at what they're eating and kind of have that conversation, they might recognize that the reason that their estrogen is so high to an alarming amount is because they are consuming too much soy. Okay? This is the most concerning in males, way more concerning in men than it is, I would say, in women, because men should be testosterone dominant. We don't want them to be estrogen dominant. Okay? Soy, I use soy sauce. A good swap for soy sauce is going to be coconut aminos. This is not to say that you have to avoid like soy sauce or all Chinese food. But with soy, you just want to be aware because a lot of things that are prepackaged, a lot of protein rich, again, that whey protein based granola bars or cereals are super high in soy. So it's just something for you to look out for because it can obviously negatively impact your health. As I've seen firsthand from somebody that I know, that is what can happen. Okay, so soy is something you just want to be a little weary about, not over consuming it and making sure it's not in every single thing that you're eating. Okay, the next one then is stevia. So this can also act as a synthetic form of estrogen and it can lead to infertility. something they're not often going to tell you about stevia because it's considered technically a natural sweetener, okay? When we look at natural sugars, stevia would fall into that category, but it is not my number one most favorite, and that is why. Okay, if you are on a fat-free, sugar-free diet, you are probably consuming way more stevia than your body should have. And kind of going back up to both soy and stevia, there's a diet that you all know I am not fond of, and of course I'm going to name drop on this podcast because there's nobody paying me not to, truthfully. But here I go again, I can't pronounce it, but that Optiva diet, you've probably seen it. If you haven't, look it up, okay? I would never, ever, ever, ever recommend that diet. And primarily the reason is because they use super low soy, super low whey protein, and natural flavors, which we're going to get into, or natural sweeteners like stevia, and they're not good quality, okay? These are doing negative things in your body, which is why every client that I've worked with that has been on that diet comes to me and they talk about how turdy they felt while they were on that diet. Because yeah, you're promised to lose weight and you do lose weight, but at what expense? Because your health is at the expense of that, okay? What you are consuming, these prepackaged granola bars, these prepackaged little brownies, these prepackaged mashed potatoes that are freeze-dried, it's disgusting. Let's be honest with ourselves, it's disgusting, okay? And when you are consuming those things, they have so many ingredients that they're not really telling you, because guess what? You're losing weight, and that should be every female's goal, right? Every woman should just want to lose weight, and that should always be on our mind. It should always be a goal of ours. False. It should not. You should care way more about your internal health than your external appearance. Not to say you can't want to change your physical or your external appearance, but again, like I said, at what expense? So that is something, those two ingredients, along with that whey, you really have to consider the quality, because any program that sells you prepackaged food is using the crappiest possible ingredients to sell you that product. All right, we're going to move on because I'm getting a little too passionate about that. We're moving on to titanium dioxide. So that has the potential to damage DNA. Moving then to natural flavors. These are not naturally sourced. I did a post on this before, but I want to reiterate this. Natural flavors does not mean what we all think it means, which is what I thought it meant, was that, oh, they're just taking the juice of a strawberry and putting it into this product, and that's the natural flavor. No. What they are doing is they are going out to these orchards, to these farms, and scientists are testing the fruit. They're eating it. They're taking a sample of it, and they're bringing it back to a lab to see how they can mimic that flavor naturally, quote, naturally, when it's not natural, right? So they're deriving the flavor from something natural like a strawberry. They're mimicking that flavor, but it is made with a different compound. Why? Because it's cheap, it's easy to manufacture in mass quantities, and it's much more flavorful than using real fruit juice. Okay, so natural flavors, remember that it is based off a natural product like a strawberry. It is not strawberry juice. It is an artificial flavor derived from a natural product. Okay, that is then when we also get into artificial sweeteners or artificial flavors. Artificial flavors, again, ditch them, right? They make your food addictive. They make you want to continue to come back to that food and eat it over and over again, or not be able to put it down. Moving to BVO, which is brominated vegetable oil. So this can lead to neurological damage. So thinking of your brain, especially with your memory, and it can also harm your brain's function. So if you listen to a lot of these ingredients, you're going to notice a lot of them are precancerous, or they cause neurological issues, brain issues. Something I would just encourage you to look a little bit more into as to, well, why would a company want to put things into a product that would make me have cancer? Or why would a company, put something into a product that would make me have Alzheimer's, which is now type 3 diabetes? Like, why would they do that? Just do your own research. I'm not going to get into it because I could talk about that for a long time and it's very controversial. So I'm not going to dive into that in this episode. But that is where, again, question, why are these companies doing this? Okay, it's not because they care about your health. And I know that really stinks to hear because we want to think the best of everyone and not have to question everything we consume. But it's just the reality of what our food system is like right now. Okay. All right. Then moving to a little bit more into artificial sweeteners. Artificial sweeteners are going to be like, is it Sweet and Low or any of those packets that you get? They're like blue or pink or yellow or white that are typically like by a coffee machine in the office. They had those at Ortho, Nebraska, where I worked before. I just know that's like what all the colors looked like. Those are all artificial, and Truvia would be another one. What artificial sweetener companies are doing is they're mixing stevia in with these. So they're saying natural sweeteners because they're mixing in stevia to artificial sweeteners, and they can say it's like a natural sweetener. So you really have to look at the package, what these do, and why people that go on a sugar-free diet or only consume sugar-free foods notice that their body isn't able to lose weight is because it decreases your metabolism, okay? Which then, again, is going to reduce your body's ability to naturally control your weight. These sweeteners are also super addictive because they're sugar alcohols. So you notice, like I used to only do sugar-free syrups and in my coffee and everything. And I noticed I was never satisfied with my coffee, even if it was a latte, but it had a sugar-free syrup. I just wanted to have more and more and more. Never satisfied. Same with like a sugar-free granola. You want to continue to eat more and more and more. It's not because you lack willpower. It's because these foods are being altered to be addictive. All right, we're moving into artificial colors and synthetic dyes. So we know this by now. You might have heard they can cause behavioral issues in children, especially being that red dye 40, yellow 5, blue 1, blue 2, and green 3. So again, think about what you're giving your kids or your teenagers or what you are consuming for breakfast in the morning. Are you having a bowl of Trix cereal with an oat milk? Because you're going to have no energy, or you're going to have too much energy, but you're not going to be satisfied and you are never going to be satiated. You're never actually going to feel full, right? You're going to probably be either bouncing off the walls or maybe, and I've heard this from multiple teachers that I've worked with, that their students who come to school eating a Pop-Tart, they are bouncing off the walls, and they're usually the ones that have behavioral issues. And I think about this all the time because we are not setting up kids for success, right? We think, oh, well, these kids have ADHD. These kids have all of these behavioral issues that they need a counselor. No, they just need to eat food that is not full of chemicals, and they need to have a good balance of healthy fats and proteins when they wake up in the morning. And I feel like a majority of these issues would completely dissolve. I know that is controversial, and I know some of you might not agree with that, and that's totally okay. But if you think about a kid starting their day with a bowl of Trix cereal and oat milk, you're getting maybe 2 grams of protein to last you until they have lunch at 11 or 12. So think about the difference is if they would have 2 eggs, 2 slices of sausage, and a couple like Branch Basics pancakes. It's a fun meal. It's still an enjoyable breakfast. It's not like you're forcing them to eat avocado toast and whatever the heck you would put on it, right? It's still a kid-friendly meal, but they're starting their day with, instead of 2 grams of protein, you've got 18 grams of protein in the eggs, probably another 18 with the bacon if they had 2 slices, and then if they had 2 small Birch Benders pancakes, that's around 6 to 7 grams of protein. Okay, so we're thinking about like 36 to 40 grams of protein to start their day instead. We have to be thinking about these things. And if you don't have kids, I mean, I don't have kids, but I think about my own self. Like this morning, I'll give you an example. I actually did have a bowl of cereal for breakfast because that's what I was hungry for before my workout. Usually I go into a workout fasted, but recently I've been feeling better if I eat a little something. So I had some, I think it's something with a C cereal. It's a better brand of like a cinnamon toast crunch. And simple ingredients, they don't add a lot of crap to it. But then I did that with raw milk and I put some blueberries in there. Okay, so then I didn't have my next meal until lunch because something came up and I didn't have any protein accessible. I had to head to a client session. And by the time I ate lunch, I was so hungry, my stomach hurt. I usually never have that. If I start my day like what I've mentioned, the alternative to that would be I feel so much better. Even though, yes, there was some protein in the raw milk, it's not enough to truly make me feel satisfied. So that is where we have to, again, think about how you're starting your day. Are you starting it with artificial flavors, natural flavors, artificial sweeteners, artificial colors? That should raise concern because there's a lot of health issues or behavioral issues that are going to come as a result of that. Okay, we're finishing with the last two, being sodium benzoate, which is a preservative that is often used in carbonated beverages and juices. So when you think about pop, usually the sugar in the pop is not the number one concern. It would be this. That is because it's used, like I said, carbonated beverages, juices, salad dressings, or some fermented foods. So this can increase your risk for cancer because of the reaction that happens between the 3 benzyne compounds that are in sodium benzoate. Okay, so when those 3 compounds negatively interact with each other, it can lead to your risk of blood cancer. The last one we're going to finish with is high fructose corn syrup, which this is a basic inflammatory ingredient. It's in majority of the food you're going to find at grocery stores, and if it doesn't have high fructose corn syrup, it probably has corn syrup because companies can get away with saying no high fructose corn syrup on the packaging. You flip it over, what is the first ingredient? Corn syrup. Don't ask me how they can get away with that. I have no idea. But I saw that firsthand when my dad actually bought his favorite licorice, and Wallabies, I think is the brand. I'll name drop. I don't care. And he had said the packaging, it was like, well, it's no high fructose corn syrup. Like, this is a fine snack for me to have after a meal or something. I'm like, yeah, it should be fine. Let's just flip it over to double check, because that is something about me. Always double check. And I always will double check. And the first ingredient was corn syrup. And he was like, that just ticks me off. And he just threw them away because, why are they allowed to lie to us like that? It's frustrating, and you should honestly be frustrated too. And if you're not, I think you really need to kind of evaluate your health, maybe in a sense, or even just evaluate how you view food, because these are things that should upset you because they upset me, and they make it so hard for people like you and me to lead a very healthy lifestyle. And that's upsetting. All right, so we are going to finish with false marketing, health halos, and then how you are kind of being tricked as a consumer, and then finish with reading labels. I knew this would be a long episode, but we're just going to keep trucking along, okay? So false marketing and health halos. We're going to start first with grass-fed anything. Grass-fed beef is typically what you're going to see. Grass-fed does not mean that cow lived in a lush green pasture and just ate off the land like we all think. It just means that their feed was partially made out of a grass feed blend. I am not somebody who is super pro grass-fed or grass-fed and finished beef. I truthfully eat local conventional beef or conventionally raised beef. That is something I actually want to have somebody on to talk about, because there's a lot of things that you are being tricked into buying at the grocery store because they're making these claims, when in reality, how this animal is raised is not that much different, depending on if you know who raised that animal, which is why I'll buy it locally from somebody that I know has raised the animal, and then they get it processed at a different location, right? That is how I go about buying my beef. Again, I want to have somebody on to talk more about that, because I think there's a lot of things about the animal system, the animal food really system, that we just have been kind of misled on. All right. Next one would be non-GMO. And briefly to state this, I think that's a load of crap. Okay. So because I think this is why nearly everything that you consume has been genetically modified since the beginning of time. If you think about our country, thinking about the United States, they would not be able to produce as much food as they do if everything had never been genetically modified. Why do you think you get tomatoes that are super huge? Well, maybe the first tomatoes were smaller, just things like that. And that's something where even when I think about buying seeds from it's a Johnny seed. So I use, it's a very high quality place, but they genetically modify their seeds, because they have to, because you have one seed and one year it produces really well, and then you notice the next year it attracts a certain type of bug. Well, what can you do to modify that seed so that the next year that doesn't happen? And I shouldn't even use a bug example because that would be an external source. But let's say you've got this tomato plant and the leaves just turn like this really deep yellow. And you don't know why they're turning yellow, but you notice that if you mixed it with a different type of breed of tomato, you could get a plant that is green and lush all year round. It's an example. I'm not saying that is the most scientific example I could have given you. It's an example. Thinking about how they can make food better, how they can make these plants stronger, that is what genetically modified means in the sense of ingredients that they're using in food. Okay? So, even if you are somebody who's very passionate about GMOs and you have your own beliefs around that, that's totally fine. But I want to remind you that you should not solely buy a product because of the label that says non-GMO. Because non-GMO does not mean that that product is healthy. It does not mean that the ingredients are perfect. And I think a good example of this would be Annie's. I do actually really like a majority of Annie's products, but I will still always look at the ingredients list because just because it's organic and non-GMO and yada, 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 all these things, I'm still always looking at the ingredients because an organic canola oil is just as harmful as a non-organic canola oil. So we have to think about this. A non-GMO ingredient, if it's a bad ingredient, it's going to be just as harmful as a GMO ingredient, genetically modified, right? Like you cannot just look at these labels and think, oh yeah, it's good for me because it's organic and non-GMO. No, you still need to look at the ingredients label. Even like I said, even if you're super passionate about buying organic everything, buying non-GMO everything, you still need to be looking at that ingredients label. Next one would be gluten-free and dairy-free. I feel like our society went through a phase kind of more in line with the dairy-free side of this of being vegan. I was actually talking to Nathan about this last weekend, how I went through kind of a vegetarian kick. I didn't really think I needed meat. I thought that meat was super weird. I thought that dairy was super weird, that we were still consuming that post-infancy, right? We're the only mammals that still consume milk after, 1 to 1.5 years old. And I was just very passionate about that for a while. And I think I should go into the evolution of how I viewed food. But long story short, being vegan, being vegetarian, if it's for a moral or ethical reason, absolutely, do your thing. If you're doing it because you think it's healthier, I would really encourage you to maybe question that. Because dairy-free food has some of the worst ingredients that I've seen on a label. Even the Trader Joe's dairy-free cheese that I, used to buy religiously, some of the worst ingredients and things that I really didn't want to consume, but I still wanted to enjoy a pizza and still wanted to enjoy some of those things. Now I swap it out for a raw cheese or I just ditch the cheese in general. Gluten-free is the same way. If you're eating gluten-free because you think it's better for you, again, look at the ingredients. Maybe the ingredients aren't actually better for you. Again, if you're celiac or you have to do either of these two for dietary reasons, that's a whole different topic on its own. If you're doing it because you think it's healthier and they're convincing you that by the marketing, again, it's probably not. Looking then also at all natural foods. Foods that are all natural doesn't really mean a whole lot. This would be an example of when you look at fruit snacks and they're like made with real fruits and vegetables, all natural. Okay, well, look at the label. What's the first ingredient? Probably sugar, And so it's things like that you just have to continue to question. Anything also that will say keto, low carb, fat-free, or sugar-free always should raise question for you. I actually got the Birch Benders keto pancakes because they were the only ones left. And I didn't recognize that they had dairy, but that they also had like a whey protein, which unless it's a quality whey protein, I'm probably not going to consume it just because quality to me is really, really important. And that is something personally that I really value. Not saying you need to, but when it comes to that, just don't let those labels or any of those diets like Atkins or keto or whatever it is, Nutrisystem, which those I know you have to buy. You can't buy like a Walmart, but I know Atkins you can. Well, it's a type of diet. Well, just because it follows under falls under a diet, that doesn't mean it's a good product. Anything also made with whole grains, check the packaging, right? Because we know whole grains are great for you, but what other things are they putting in that whole grain pasta? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not just whole grain flour blends and water, which is where I would always opt for like a chickpea or a red lentil or a brown rice and red lentil pasta kind of combo. And then anything that is baked, question again. So like baked chips. I remember when I would go to Subway and I was like, oh yeah, baked chips. Like those are the best version of a chip. Well, if you look at the ingredients on a baked chip versus like a baked Lay's potato chip versus the regular Lay's potato chips, the ingredients are almost identical. The only difference is how it has been manufactured, right? How that potato has been manipulated to make a potato chip. And then I just want to finish by mentioning that anything that is in the health food section of a grocery store, you should question. You should also question why the grocery store needs to have a health food section if all the other food is not healthy. Ding, ding. That is something I bring up to every client when we go and do our grocery store navigation session is, why do they have to have a health section at the grocery store? I don't know. Everything should be healthy, shouldn't it? Or everything should be at least healthy for the consumer if it's in a grocery store. So why do we have a health food section? Things to think about, folks. I hope I'm leaving you with a lot of things to kind of marinate on. We're going to finish then with tricking the consumer, because these are some ways that companies are tricking you. Health Halos is an example, right? Using gluten-free, dairy-free, non-GMO, organic. Those things mean nothing to me if the ingredient list is still crap. Okay, so other ways that they can do this is making the photo on the package look like a larger portion size. Again, kind of coming back to the cereal I had this morning for breakfast. The bowl on the front is like a big bowl of cereal, and I'm like, oh, that must be roughly a serving size. And I know better, I just wasn't thinking. So I put it into a bowl, and I've had 2 helpings of the cereal since I bought it. There's supposed to be 7 servings in this box, and I swear the thing is like less than half full. And I'm like, I just didn't really eat that much. Like I had 1 bowl of cereal, which in my mind was about maybe like a cup and a half. I don't measure things super closely, but I'm like, there is no way that everybody is making 7 servings out of this box of cereal. It is, first off, so tiny. And also the photo on the front makes it look like a big old bowl of cereal that you can enjoy for the same amount of calories and the same nutritional content. So that is one way they will try to trick your brain into thinking that you really should consume more of the product, even when you should consume less of it to get an actual serving size. Okay, another one that I was thinking about is the colorful packaging with like a farm on it and farm animals, and there's a sun and clouds, and they just make it look like this happy little farm on this packaging. There might be a company that pops into your brain. The one I'm implying is Chobani. Chobani products are super low quality, even though they are expensive. They look beautiful. Their packaging is beautiful. It's so cute. It makes you want to buy the product. But if you look at their oat milk especially, they've got so many gums, so much sugar, just additives. They add in vitamins because there's no nutritional benefit to oat milk, so they have to add it in. So another one that would fall in line with us too is their Greek yogurt. Their vanilla Greek yogurt is super, super high in sugar content. Okay, so even if a package looks like a happy little farm and it just is so cute, you just want to buy it. Again, look at those ingredients. That is something I always will come back to. Look at the ingredients, because yes, it looks like such a wonderful product. It's expensive. It would make you think that it was a better option, but it's not necessarily. Next way, and the final way that companies are trying to trick the consumer, in my opinion, there's probably so many more examples that you could come up with, is anything that has the word farm in it. So Hillshire Farm came into mind. Hillshire Farm makes those super low quality deli meats and sausages. I personally, honestly, if I was to shop at Walmart, would either get the meat counter or buy Hillshire Farm. This isn't to say I'm perfect in any of my deli meat selection when I need it, but Hillshire Farms, again, it makes you think, well, it's a farm. Like, it has to be so small and we're supporting a small farm. It's a major company. Just because it says farm doesn't mean they're not using hundreds of other farms to raise these animals that they are then manufacturing or butchering. And so most often I would say with Hillshire Farms, you just want to look at their sausages. That's when the ingredients are going to be the worst. And it's kind of ridiculous that I know all of these things, but I feel like I've been shopping with enough people that a lot of this is just kind of memorized. And that doesn't mean that these things don't change over time, but they can. All right. So ingredients can change over time, but when it comes to Hillshire Farms sausage, they usually contain high fructose corn syrup, artificial colors, and natural flavors. Just things to look for. So wrapping this all up in a bow, I know this has been a lengthy episode, lots of opinions, hopefully lots of things for you to think about. I want to just finish with 4 ways that you can go about reading the label on a product to make sure that you are just kind of checking it all out, feeling like a conscious consumer and knowing what you're putting into your body or your family's body. Number 1, always, can't emphasize that enough, look at the ingredients list first. I used to always look at calories, didn't care about ingredients. I wish I would have looked at ingredients because once I started looking at ingredients, I noticed that the overall inflammation in my body significantly decreased. If the ingredients aren't great, for me, my rule of thumb is the first 14 ingredients. That's extreme. I tell clients to start with the first 7 ingredients. If they fall into the inflammatory category, then you should find another product, right? Find another option. If you can't find another option, that might be where it's time to slow down and make that food from scratch. Number 2, look at added sugar. So if you don't know what the sugar source is in a sweet product, look to see what the added sugar content is. Typically, we want to be below 7. An example of this would be those fruit snacks that claim they're made with real fruit. If it was truly made with real fruit, it should be fairly low in added sugar, and it's not. Okay, so that's where you again look at added sugar. You want it to be under 7 grams. The exception here is going to be like enjoying a piece of wedding cake or enjoying some Oreos or something that you love that you know is naturally going to be sweet, or you're going to make it at home and it's made with a high quality sweetener. Right? So my exceptions here is like a coconut sugar, maple syrup, or honey, agave. If those are the sweeteners that they're adding sugar to a product, I'm like, I'm okay with that. If it is high fructose corn syrup or white sugar, that is where you want it to be under that 7 grams. The next one is to check sodium. This is only if that's a concern for you, type 2 diabetic, or if you have a heart concern or a respiratory issue, you'll want to just be aware of sodium. That is because the quality of salt that they're using in these foods, right, to contribute to the sodium content is very low. It's a white table salt. Well, when I cook at home, I use a high quality sea salt. That's going to be the difference in quality. But when you're looking at a food label, you want it to be kind of in between that 200 to 250 milligrams per that serving you're consuming. Anything above that is getting a little high. An example would be Liquid IV is extremely high in sodium and it's not high quality. One product I would again look for a swap for if that's something that you take every day or if you really like. Elementi is another option, or Element, as well as Feel Goods is another one. And then finally is to never just trust the marketing or packaging on a product. Make sure you are using this 3-step process to make sure that it is a quality product and that it will not cause health issues for you in the future. Okay, well that is it for today's episode. I think we should all take a deep breath here together because I know this was a lot of information. Right? It's going to be okay. These ingredients are not things I want you to leave feeling stressed and overwhelmed about. If you would like a full list of what these ingredients are, I can send this document your way so you can have a copy of it. But again, practice balance. You can't do any sort of eating with restriction. Discipline sometimes has to come into play, but restriction, it just never works, right? if you look at your favorite food in the whole wide world and it has these ingredients, I'm going to encourage you to still consume it, but consume it in a balanced way. Make sure you're eating quality foods 90% of the time. And then, the rest of the time, it's okay to enjoy something that's not perfect. I'm not telling you need to be perfect, and I hope you recognize that I am not perfect in this either. Some of these ingredients, when I was doing my own research, shocked me. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't actually been looking for that in my food. How do I know? Well, one way that has made it easy for me to know is when I produce food in my own kitchen. I know that's not reality for everybody, but just something, again, if you have a food that is your favorite or something you eat every single day and you look at the ingredients and they're not great, have that be the one food this week that you're going to find a swap for, or you're going to learn how to make from scratch. Do not take this all in and think all these changes need to be made overnight. I work with clients over the span of 6 months to make these changes. That's a long, long time. That is 24 weeks that we are working together to make these changes. So kind of on both sides. If you are thinking, okay, I need to make these changes and I don't know where to start, let's have that conversation of what getting support with this would look like. And on the other hand, if you're like, yeah, okay, thinking of this as a 6-month plan, I think this is manageable by myself. Awesome. I just encourage you, make one swap every single time you go to the grocery store, or every week, find one swap for a product that you use all the time. Okay? All right, so we are going to finish today's episode by closing it in prayer. I put prayer requests up on my Instagram, trying to do it every Monday. I've been really bad the last couple of weeks, but I had a lot of people write in and a lot of teachers that are headed back to school. So we are definitely going to pray over them. And so go ahead and bow your head. Don't close your eyes if you're driving, and go ahead and pray with me. So dear Lord, just thank you for today. Thank you for the cooler weather. Thank you for the opportunity I've had to move my body outside today. And I just pray that over anybody who's listening, that they get that opportunity as well. Lord, I pray for all the teachers out there. I pray for just safety for students, and that these teachers feel such a positive energy going into this new year, regardless of what they're bringing with them, that they are able to just truly give their attention and energy into the students and taking care of themselves when it's needed. I just pray for this first week of school to be peaceful and quiet, and that everything just falls very gradually and naturally back into routine. I also pray for MD, and that she just has the strength to make some of those very hard decisions that she needs to make and knows she needs to make, and that you're just over her as she is going through this thought process, or these thought processes of what needs to give and what changes need to be made in her life. Lord, I also pray for MF, and that she just finds some of the best friends that hold her accountable and that are just have you at the center of their lives and really just bring such a different energy into her life. I also pray for B, and that she just continues to do well with her recovery, and that she's able to stay out of the hospital and clinic, and that she continues to just nourish her body so well and use that food for fuel. I also finally just pray for Kay, and that she is able to just feel comforted in this new season of life with all the change that is happening, and that she still shows up for other people in such a positive way, but mostly for herself, and that she's able to just take care of herself even though everything around her and in her life is changing, that she just recognizes that you are that consistency, and that you are really going to be that for her as she goes through these different stages. And lastly, just pray for protection over everyone as they maybe go on vacation and finish up trips or start going to school or going back to work, and that you just keep them safe as we wrap up summer and enter into a new season. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, on Instagram, Facebook, Lemonade, TikTok, everything. I'm the most active on Instagram, so if you need to talk to me or want to chat about something, that's going to be the best place to reach me, or my email is always in the description of today's episode as well. All right, so with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.